It's that time of year once again, and although I'm not actively participating, I know there's a whole lot of you that are. So, for the rest of the month, we're going alcohol-free Thursday. Coming up today, we have what I can safely say is my favourite non-alcoholic beer to date. Granted, it isn't a particularly long list, but hopefully within the next few weeks I'll definitely be adding to it. And our first offering comes all the way from NYC and the Brooklyn Brewery. Now, the story of Brooklyn dates all the way back to the 1880s, where, much like our very own East End of London, Brooklyn too was a hub of major industry and home to many of the city's working class. And with an influx of European immigration, it was only a matter of time before these new arrivals would start to miss the home comforts of those fresh brews. In no time at all, breweries were springing up across the land, and Brooklyn was home to a hell of a lot of them, at one time producing more than 10% of the whole country's beer production. But of course the Puritans and Prohibition soon brought those empires crumbling down. Fast forward 100 years or so, a young Garrett Oliver was being wowed by traditional cask ales when he made his way over to London, where he remained for many years, sampling all that Europe had to offer as far as the beer goes. And on his return home, he teamed up with Steve Hindy and Tom Potter to open their now infamous Williamsburg Brewery. And today we have their first foray into the world of non-alcoholic beer. And I will say, during my attempts at Stoptober and Dry January, my fridge sure has been full with these beauts. Granted, back then the options weren't exactly plentiful, so I'm also quite excited to see just how far AF beers have come in the past few years. And here it is, Special Effect, an alcohol-free hoppy lager. It tastes just like a regular beer, but therein lies the special effect. It's only 0.4% ABV, and it's actually brewed on behalf of Brooklyn by none other than Carlsberg, which means it is and always has been very readily available. And although I have completed the odd Dry January, I don't often take part, as I suffer from far too much beer FOMO. That, and my birthday's also in January, so who wants to celebrate a dry birthday? But let's see if this bad boy is as good as I remember it. Let's get pouring. So it is real citrus on the nose, quite refreshing, and it does have a malty backbone to it, quite bready too. Oh, so that citrus, it is really refreshing up top. A real lemon and lime kick to it. And I gotta admit, it definitely looks the part too. It's got a lovely amber clear body to it and quite a rocky just off white head. And yeah, it is quite malty, biscuity almost in that middle. And there is a piney resinous to that finish, along with that zesty citrus bitterness. And again, if you weren't told, you could be fooled for thinking this was the real deal. The only real giveaway is that slightly dry, almost plasticky like mouthfeel, which seems to be common in most alcohol-free beers. That said, it is far less pronounced here. I have had it a lot stronger and a lot more noticeable in others. And I tell you what, if this is what the alcohol-free beers were like 2-3 years ago, I cannot wait to try some of the more modern ones. And I guess the only real downer is it does feel just a little bit hollow inside. But, to be fair, at 0.4%, I guess it sort of is. So, from that very first sip, it was just as I remembered it. Fresh, vibrant. It's got a lovely uplifting citrus to it and just an all-round refreshing brew. And although it lacks the ABV, it definitely carries through infinitely more flavour than your bog standard commercially produced lager. Granted, you don't find too many overly hopped commercially produced lagers, but right up top you are smacked in the mouth with huge notes of lemon and lime. And those citrus notes, they carry on right through to the finish. And in those middles, you get a lovely malty, bready, biscuity feel. But unfortunately, without that alcohol to back it up, it does feel a little lifeless and a little unfulfilling. But I hardly think the lack of alcohol is really much criticism in an alcohol-free beer. And on the bright side, it definitely didn't leave me feeling gassed and full, which is often a criticism I get when I'm drinking lagers. But it is in that finish where you do notice that something is just amiss, as when that beer fades, it does leave that dryness and that almost plastic-like quality, which seems to be a signature of alcohol-free beers. But I am rather intrigued to know if maybe more modern techniques have been able to reduce or even remove that note, and give the beer a more traditional mouthfeel in the end. But those general criticisms aside, this was an absolute joy. If you are doing dry January and you're looking for a good fridge filler, then you won't go far wrong with these. And I'd even be as bold enough to say I actually prefer this to their core lager. It's obviously a much hoppier brew, but as a result it is much more enjoyable too.